Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for August 18th of 2023, and currently we don't really have all that much of a high potential for severe weather. However, we do have a few marginal threats for the New England area, the southwestern United States, for Arizona, southern Utah, Nevada, and parts of southeastern California. We also do have a marginal threat for central Montana here. As for our threats for today, we do have not all that much of a tornado threat for today, so I likely will not be covering our energy helicity index models for today. As for wind, we do have a couple 5% for those marginal threat regions, and as for hail, we don't really have all that much of a hail potential. Taking a look at our 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook, I likely will only be doing this for our hurricane season. We are right around the corner for hurricane season, and you can see that we do have some strong development already in the Atlantic Ocean that could pose a threat over the next few days, including next week and maybe the week after that as well, for tropical weather if you live in a hurricane-prone area. So I will be covering the 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook and likely our 2-day graphical tropical weather outlook, as we are right around the corner for hurricane season, if not already in it, and I will be doing this for the duration of hurricane season. However, for today, we do have a few areas of development in the Atlantic that could pose a threat to hurricane-prone areas across the eastern coast of the United States and the Gulf Coast. We do have this 70% chance of cyclone formation in the next 70 days. In the next 7 days, as well as this one area for 40%, this one area for 30%, and it does look like we do have a little bit of disturbance already in the Bahamas, in the Caribbean, that could propagate westward, and by the time it enters the Gulf of Mexico, it does have a 40% for cyclonic development in the Gulf of Mexico that could pose a threat to the Gulf Coast states. However, all of these could definitely pose a threat to the eastern United States coast if you live in a hurricane-prone area, so do keep that in mind over the next few days if you live in any hurricane-prone areas. And then if we do take a look at our 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook for the Pacific Ocean, for the eastern Pacific, you can see that we do have Hurricane Hillary here. It is currently a Category 4 hurricane in the eastern Pacific. It is expected to move northward over the next few days, and likely going to impact Southern California as a tropical storm, bringing the possibility of flooding and the possibility of some high winds, however not hurricane force. However, we could definitely see the possibility of some strong winds across Southern California by the time this impacts. It is expected to impact over what seems to be either the night of Sunday or early Monday this week. So again, this could bring the possibility of high winds and the possibility of some intense flooding in low-lying areas. So if you do live in areas like Los Angeles and San Diego or across Southern California, please stay with the alert for the time being, as this could potentially be a dangerous situation. Taking a look at our Radar Omega model, starting off with our 500 millibars like we usually do, you can see mainly focusing on the marginal threats for now. For the marginal threat across the New England corridor, you can see that we do have a shortwave trough that is continuing to propagate eastward that did trigger severe weather the last couple of days. It is going to likely trigger severe weather development for the last day of its lifetime before moving off into the Atlantic Ocean. You can see it does have this marginal threat. That is going to be the primary trigger for that marginal threat. And then as for the marginal threats that are across the western United States for Arizona and Montana, you can see that we do have a subtropical jet that is making its way out of the Pacific Ocean. It is it is fairly weak, so it is only really going to be supportive of that marginal threat. However, it does look like across Montana, it could have some aid from this jet stream that is across southern Canada. However, the primary triggering factors for these marginal threats are going to be this very weak subtropical jet, and we could definitely see the possibility of some weak thunderstorms across those marginal threat regions. If we take a look at our composite reflectivity, focusing on the marginal threat region for the New England corridor, you can see that the low pressure system that is currently making its way eastward is expected to trigger some spotty showers, some spotty thunderstorms across the marginal threat region in the New England region up into Maine. This likely has mostly the potential for damaging winds, as we don't really have any other potential for hail or tornadoes, and at most we have a 5% wind threat for these various marginal threat regions. Overall, our main threats are going to be damaging winds and possibly more isolated damaging winds for these various marginal threats. And then for the marginal threats across the western United States region, you can see that we do have some more isolated systems across Arizona. In our various ingredients will likely have to be across the region for these isolated storms to use, for them to be usable for the various threats. But overall, our various threats are going to be mostly damaging winds, so it shouldn't really matter all that much. And the same thing does go for the marginal threat across Montana. We are expected to see some widespread thunderstorms with maybe a cluster of thunderstorms back towards the northern region of the marginal threat area, as we do have a cluster of thunderstorms that is expected to move eastward across the northern regions of that marginal threat region. However, we could see the possibility of more isolated thunderstorms for the rest of this marginal threat. Taking a look at our dew points, focusing on the marginal threat region associated with that shortwave trough of the New England corridor, you can see that we do have some fairly strong dew points. We do have dew points that we would typically see across the southern United States that are currently being worked out into the Atlantic Ocean by the shortwave trough. We do have dew points that are expected to be in the mid-60s to the upper 60s as well as the low 70s, providing the possibility of some fairly strong instability, possibly getting up into the 2000s and maybe a little bit higher. And then as for the marginal threats for the western United States region, you can see dew points for that marginal threat across Arizona. We do have some fairly moderate dew points across this region. Dew points are going to be mostly in the low 60s to the upper 50s, which will support the possibility of overall weaker instability, likely going to be in the 1000s to possibly the 2000s range. And then for the marginal threat region across Montana, you can see that we do have even weaker dew points. We do have dew points that are expected to be in the upper 40s and the low to even the mid and possibly the upper 50s. These are fairly weak, so we shouldn't really see all that strong instability. In fact, we should see instability that is likely going to be in the 1000s to likely mostly in the triple digits range. So again, storms aren't really expected to be all too strong, with overall very, very weak dew points associated with these marginal threats regions. And the reason we're not seeing marginal threats or higher for this intense amount of moisture that is returning back to a large portion of the United States is the fact that we have a very large dominating high pressure system. And in fact, if I go back to the 500 millibars, you can see that we do have a very, very large high pressure system that is shaping our jet stream. And the only regions that are able to see severe weather development are regions like this marginal threat that does have this shortwave trough that can trigger severe weather, and this very weak subtropical jet coming out of the Pacific to trigger these two marginal threats for Arizona and Montana. So this dominating high pressure system is going to be controlling our weather for a lot of this week and possibly into next week as well. And then if we take a look at our instability, you can see across the various marginal threat regions, mainly for the marginal threats across the western United States, we do have very, very weak instability that is going to be back towards the moderate range, back in the 1000s and triple digits, possibly getting into the low 2000s for Arizona, and then more so back in the 1000s to triple digits range across Montana. And then for the marginal threat for the New England corridor, we do have even weaker instability. Cape values are going to be in the triple digits in the low 1000s range, possibly getting into the mid 1000s range. So overall, very, very weak instability is going to be expected for these particular locations because of the very shortwave troughs and that dominating high pressure system that is across a large portion of the United States, and those very shortwave troughs that push a lot of the moisture and instability out into the Atlantic Ocean the last couple of days. So overall, our severe potential is going to be pretty low until this high pressure system moves out of the way or breaks down. So overall, with this kind of instability and our low potential for various kind of threats such as tornadoes and hail, our main threats for today are going to be maybe some flooding potential and the possibility of some damaging winds across these different marginal threat regions. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator. And if you live in any of the areas that I covered for severe weather for today, please stay weather alert for the time being, and hopefully I will be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.